pick it up directly.
Yeah,
Okay.
but we'll see. And if not, I'll send it as well. I know that the transcript is not so good, so the recording would be a lot better to have. Usually, with
Okay.
the software is not optimal yet. I've explained a little bit about our research in the email. So we're focusing on a resident benefit as a concept. And our end goal is to create a toolkit for policymakers to make decisions on which methods to use for certain issues. And we're happy to talk to you because we've read a lot of papers from you. My first question is if the residents benefit as a concept, because it's a term that we sort of translated from Dutch. So in literature, you don't see the word resident benefit as much, but if I say it in this context, what is it in your perception?
Residents benefit. So tourism provides benefit, perceived and actual benefits to the residents of the host communities.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's pretty obvious, and we've done quite a bit of research on that.
Yeah, but it's as a term, because we translated it to English, it's not strange. That's because usually you see impacts or quality of life elements, but not the term resident benefit as such. But that's okay. Okay. And we're focusing on the experience benefits, so not the objective benefits. We've been doing a lot of research on these fields. How do you see changes over time regarding to residents' benefit in research or in destinations?
Well, I'm not sure about the trends. I think journalists are much better and adept to capturing those trends than academics. Academics, tend to generate theoretical models and come up with indicators or metrics, and we validate those metrics. But in terms of capturing exactly what's happening over time, I don't think we're equipped, or at least we don't do this kind of research. Journalists tend to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can't give you an intelligent answer about what are the trends right now.
And if you look at the changes in how academics treat impacts, resident benefit, is that changed a lot?
Right. Over the years, much of the impact of tourism development on host communities have been captured by objective indicators. Objective indicators in terms of, the kind of economic impact of tourism on the community, in terms of the expenditures of tourists in the host community, mostly economic indicators, but also more recently, the impact of social and environmental indicators have been used to capture the impact of tourism development. So again, environmental indicators in terms of water pollution, in terms of land pollution, in terms of traffic congestion, a whole bunch of other things related to environmental types of pollutants, and social impact. Again, in terms of objective indicators, we usually talk about things like crime, that tourism can bring with it, crime and prostitution and drugs and all kinds of other things, especially in the later stages of tourism development. So that has been the case, but now, at least for the last 20 something years, we've been focusing on the subjective indicators, meaning how do residents perceive the impact of tourism on their communities. And we've developed metrics and indicators and models to help us capture that.
Yeah. So it went from objective to more subjective indicators, and your study from 2012, if I recall right, also proved that there's a relation between the impacts and the quality of life domains. So it went more and more in that direction. If you look at other divisions that are common in science, like cognitive elements, affective elements, or cognitive elements, do you see differences in that over time? Is it mostly about beliefs, or are more and more also feelings measured?
Right. So the way we capture the residents' perceived benefits or costs, for that matter, so costs and benefits associated with tourism development, tend to be a combination of cognitions as well as affect. So when we talk about cognition, we're talking about the perceived impact. And then when we're talking about affect, we're talking about satisfaction. So one particular model that we've been using throughout, and it has been well established in quality of life studies, as well as in travel and tourism, is called bottom-up spillover model. Mm-hmm. Bottom-up spillover, and the idea is very simple, and that is when you're talking about satisfaction, and when you're looking at life satisfaction is usually a proxy of what we call quality of life. It would be subjective well-being. So life satisfaction is, you can actually look at it from in terms of a hierarchy, and on top of the hierarchy would be life satisfaction. Well, what determines life satisfaction would be how people feel about their different life domains. So when I ask you, how do you feel about your life at large? You think, well, what's important to me? Is it my work life? Is it my family life? Is it my social life? Is it my leisure life? And those life domains that seems to be very salient, very important, and the feelings that are embedded in those domains tend to influence the life satisfaction judgment. So if you're the kind of person who think that my social life is probably the most important, then the satisfaction with social life tends to influence the judgment associated with life satisfaction. So we're talking about life satisfaction on top of the pyramid, and then we have domain satisfaction with social life, with family life, with work life, with community life, with cultural life, and so forth. These tend to influence the life satisfaction judgment. Now, what influences domain satisfaction, meaning, let's say, if we're talking about something like leisure life or social life or community life, and how do you feel about, the feelings that one invests in those life domains? These tend to be at the bottom of the pyramid, and they are related to specific events. So in the context of a community, and we're talking about community residents, people interact with tourists. So tourism in their community is very multifaceted. So in the sense that some of the recreational aspects related to tourism are also used by the residents. So some of those benefits are accrued that way. And if let's say a resident experiences a tourist event in their community, then they may feel satisfied or dissatisfied. And these feelings related to specific events that are associated with tourism in their community tend to trickle up and influence how people are satisfied with their social life, with their cultural life, with their community life, with their work life, with their family life, and so forth. So there's a trickle up influence of feelings that are at the very bottom of the pyramid related to life events that tend to influence domain satisfaction, how people feel about their social life, family life, and so forth, that ultimately trickle all the way up to life satisfaction. So the idea then, if we embrace this model and we applied this model to allow us to capture the impact of tourism development in host communities, then the indicators that we use would be things like perceived impact of tourism on on the economy. On the economy meaning the economy of the community, perceived impact of tourism on cultural life, on community life, on social life, right? On the environment. So these are perceptions related to perceived benefits and costs related to specific life domains. And then we measure the impact of these perceptions on how people feel about their life domain. So we ask them about, how are you satisfied with your social life, with your family life, with your work life, and so forth. And then we also capture indicators related to life satisfaction. And then we try and relate. We come up with a model, and our hypothesis would be the perceptions related to those particular life events related to tourism tend to impact satisfaction with life domains, which in turn they impact satisfaction with life. Yeah. So that's the theoretical model that we've been using, and we've got indicators and well-established metrics that allow us to help policymakers, at the community level, to capture the impact of tourism development in their own communities.
Yeah, and you explicitly say on community level. Is it also measured on individual level?
These are subjective perceptions.
Yeah, so they are individual. You translate.
So we're talking about, residents making evaluations about the impact of tourism on their communities and how these types of impacts affect their domain satisfaction and ultimately their own life satisfaction. Yeah. So this is at the individual level, but then when you aggregate the individual scores, then you can have a good understanding of the community at large.
Yeah. And if this is done mostly by surveys.
Yes.
If you look at the positive and negative sides of this setup, so with these different levels, for a policymaker, what are the pros and cons for this method, in your opinion?
Well, the pros and cons. The pros are definitely that you can't count on objective indicators to capture the impact of tourism on quality of life, because quality of life, the subjective experience of community residents have to be taken into account. And there maybe there is a discrepancy between what you can capture in terms of objective indicators and subjective indicators. So the subjective indicators and the objective indicators, they have to be in sync. They have to gel, meaning they have to be consistent. If there is inconsistency, well, that tells you something. That's a different story, in the sense that whatever you're doing at the community level as a policymaker, these are not registering in terms of how the community residents are perceiving and feeling, and you need to kind of literally launch a publicity or a public relations campaign in order to convince the community residents that you're doing good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you might, in American language, you might be shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah. And from the perspective of the policymaker, is this do they see this as an expensive research, or is it in type of cost?
No, a community survey should not be expensive. As a matter of fact, on all accounts, capturing objective indicators, although that objective indicators is a must, usually survey that are conducted almost on an annual basis is actually a very small portion of the cost of collecting objective indicators.
Yeah.
So the cost is very marginal.
Very marginal, yeah. So we try to compare things. So that's why I'm asking. And if you look at the non-response, because I think the questionnaires are quite long. How do you look at that?
Right. Yeah. The non-response. So sampling is very important, and the sampling method should be selected wisely. What does that mean? If you do something like, for example, let's say you put the survey on the internet and you do data collection on the internet, that would probably be the easiest way for residents to be able to complete a survey. But the question is to get them to open that link on the internet and complete the survey. So what we've done in the past, we, in terms of community indicators and surveys related to community indicators, we asked, we recruit the mayor or community leaders that are very well known in the community, and they reach out to community residents and tell them about the importance of this survey. And please take a few minutes to complete the survey, which is easily accessible by clicking on your computer or on your cell phone, mobile phone, and you'll be able to do that. That would probably be the easiest way and the most cost-efficient way to generate a high response rate.
Yeah. And high response rate. And what is the average time that you take to the duration of the survey? Yeah.
The survey based on I'm looking at, for example, one article that we published. I don't know whether that's the one that you're looking at. It's published in Tourism Management, and it's called "How Does Tourism in a Community Impact the Quality of Life of Community Residents?"
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a third co-author on this. Kyungmi Kim is a Korean doctoral student who essentially got her doctorate degree from Virginia Tech, and I was serving on her dissertation committee many years ago. And Muzaffar Yusal was essentially the chair of the committee. And So the three of us came up with the model and the metrics, and we conducted the study in the state of Virginia to capture the impact of tourism on community quality of life. Now, we conducted a survey, and in the context of that survey, I'm gonna take you. I don't know whether do you have it open?
Yeah. No, I don't have it open, but I can look for it. So if you have to look at, it's just in general, like if you compare this to other methods, would it be longer for fast results or longer?
Well, the reason why I'm looking at it, I'm looking at table 4. I'm looking at the specific survey items, and we have perception of economic impact. I've got 3 items. Perception of social impact, 3 items. Another cultural impact, 4 items, and so forth. In total, we've got something like 20 something items. My goodness, it takes just a few minutes.
Yeah.
But then, of course, when you
Yeah.
when you have the demographics and stuff, probably in total it would take between 10 to 15 minutes to complete.
Yeah, 10, 15 minutes, and you would leave it open, the link for 1 or 2 weeks, or
Right.
collect the data. Yeah. And so this is one method, the survey. Are you familiar with other methods of measuring a resident benefit?
Right. Well, that's why we get talking about objective indicators. So objective indicators, as a matter of fact, we have something about that in that article. So objective indicators would be things like pollution growth rate in a certain interval of time, traveler spending growth rate.
Yeah, that's, but what I'm sorry, I probably didn't say it right. What I meant is, do you ever use maybe qualitative research as well, or maybe other, maybe
right.
social media?
So this particular study that I'm referring to, we started out with qualitative data, qualitative research, meaning that we conducted, in this case, I think we conducted in-depth interviews of a whole bunch of people. And based on the interviews, we were able to get a better understanding what those perceived benefits and costs of tourism. And this is how we came up with the perception of perceived benefits and costs related to tourism. So yes, qualitative research is a first step, but it's not the only step. So you have to complement it with quantitative research, and quantitative research in this context would be survey research.
Yeah, because if for a certain reason they would only like to have qualitative data, would you still what would be the effect of that?
What would be the what?
Well, you say it's optimal to do first qualitative and then quantitative research, but let's say there's this restriction of budget for the policymakers, and sometimes they might choose for one or the other. Can there be a reason why you would say advise to only do qualitative research?
Qualitative research can generate quite a bit of rich data, but the problem with the richness of data is that it cannot be generalizable to the community at large.
No.
The only way to do this is to have a good sample, a probability sample that would allow you to generalize the study findings to the population at large. And that comes from, again, a good sampling technique that may involve a probability sample with a stratification method to make sure that everybody in the community is represented, and therefore their perceptions and their feelings about tourism development would be captured and generalized to the community at large.
Yeah. And so if there's a need for rich data, rich understanding, that would be a reason for choosing only qualitative with this sampling. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to check what you just said. So that's what you're saying. So the best would be both, but if you qualitative, do it like this.
Right. Yeah, qualitative research is, even if they have a small budget, they can do focus group, several focus group, and that doesn't cost much. They can do something like maybe 20 or 25 in-depth interviews. That hardly costs anything. The survey part may cost, again in euros, probably maybe $5,000 at the most. Something marginal. It's for public policy officials or in public administration, that cost is minimal.
Is minimal
compared to other costs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And another thing we would like to know is, imagine there would be, so you could do it on the 3 levels, or would there be an option to have a sort of index that you could do on a longitudinal basis with just a couple of indicators to have sort of monitor the residents?
So once you do it the first time and make sure that you validate the perception of benefits and costs of tourism, and you relate those benefits, those perceived benefits and costs to domain satisfaction and life satisfaction, you don't need to repeat that. Now you have a valid measure, and you can come up with an index that would, in essence, aggregate the perception of benefits and costs in relation to culture, in relation to sports and recreation, in relation to the economy, in relation to the environment, and so forth. So you can definitely develop an index based on those perceived benefits and costs. But to begin with, you need to start out with testing the validity of that index by relating those perceived costs and benefits to domain satisfaction and life satisfaction, so that you'd be able to say that index is truly is a quality of life index related to tourism.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to be able to say that.
No. And the index might be different for each destination.
That's true. Very true.
So there's no one solution for multiple destinations. Yeah.
Well, you may be able to, you're thinking in terms of advising policymakers in the Netherlands, or is it to European or to other countries in Europe, or to the world at large, or what's the objective there?
The objective for now is in the Netherlands, because we have this ambition of each resident should benefit. So we're trying to roll it out in the Netherlands.
Right. So what I might suggest is, in the context of tourism communities, you may be able to develop different types of indices in relation to different types of communities, host communities. So you may have ecotourism. And there are communities that are involved in ecotourism. There may be communities that are involved in sports and recreation, in which people go there for specifically engaging in sports and recreation and nothing else. There are host communities that are involved in medical tourism. So conceivably, you can develop indices related to the type of tourism community.
Yeah.
And therefore, once you develop those different indices, then you say, this community is ecotourism. I have an index for that. This community is sports and recreation. I have an index for that kind of thing. So your statement says you have to do this for every community. Maybe not.
No.
You're able to develop categories of communities and develop indices as such.
Yeah. And you feel type of tourism is important, life stage probably as well, or are there only?
Yeah. So the development cycle of tourism in the community is also very important. And you're absolutely right, because based on our study finding is that the life stage associated with tourism development tend to generate different perceptions. Like, for example, in the latter stages of tourism development, the environmental impact tend to be much negative than positive. Initially, the economic boom of tourism development in the beginning stages of tourism development tend to be more impactful on the quality of life, but in the latter stages, the environmental impact may turn things around.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So the stage of tourism development is a very important factor, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah, we're having this checklist, so I'm thinking to compare with this this larger study. Would you be able to let? Do you also experience with differentiating between type of visitors? Can the respondent also make comments on, because there can be multiple, like Amsterdam, for example, that you've got cultural tourists, but you've also got the bachelor parties, and I can imagine there's a huge difference in how you perceive that impact. To what extent did you take that into consideration? If people can make a difference between types of tourism that they experience?
Yeah. So a tourist community or a host community that welcomes tourists can be multifaceted, in the sense that, like you said, it may serve residents. It may serve residents and tourism in different ways. And if there is such a thing, then you will need to capture those perceptions in a multifaceted way. I'm thinking in terms of age. For example, young people tend to emphasize or consider certain kinds of events, tourist events, much more important than others. Young people like, for example, sports and recreational, that would be kind of vigorous and strenuous and very, very much related to vitality. But when it comes to the older people, They like a little bit more of a tranquil kind of a landscape, maybe a walk in the park, and therefore they would emphasize different aspects of tourism development, and the benefits related to the tourism. Uh, if you have situations like that, then I would recommend that you break things down in terms of demographics and possibly psychographics, and then you analyze these perceptions based on these different groupings. So you break things down by age, and then you capture the perceived benefits and costs, for the young people compared to the middle-aged people, compared to the older people, people who are women versus men, people who are married versus non-married. So there's a whole bunch of demographics as well as lifestyle kinds of consideration that you can embed in the survey, and you can analyze these different groups in a way to capture those differences.
Yeah, and that's the respondent's perspective. So the respondent's differences, but imagine that the tourist is very different, so that they have different tourist groups, and the image of one tourist group is completely different than the other, and that might also have an impact. If you fill in the survey thinking of the bachelor parties in Amsterdam, you probably have different perceptions than if you think about the cultural tourists going through the museums. Do you know what I mean? So not the person, the respondent, but the tourists might also be very different groups.
So what you're saying is that for a community resident in completing the survey, they may be thinking about what tourists may be experiencing rather than what they experience?
No, what I mean is, if you ask if they benefit from tourism, and especially for the social, for example, or cultural elements, I can imagine that they think of interaction with a certain group. So if this group is very different, that if I fill in the survey on cultural aspects thinking about the bachelor parties in front of my door, that's different than if I walk through the city and see cultural tourists going to museums. If that's in my head. Do you know what I mean?
I didn't actually think about that. And we didn't take that into account in coming up with our theoretical model and coming up with the indicators and the metrics. So this is a good point, and you need to account for that. But I'm not sure exactly how to account for it right now. We need to adjust the theoretical models as well as some of the metrics to capture exactly what you're talking about. So this is a challenge.
Yeah, but it's yeah. Okay, so that's interesting to at least think about, but it's not something you already experience.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And do you also take image of tourists into account in the surveys, like how they look at the tourists coming in? What's the general image?
This is a different kind of body of research that we talk about in terms of the image of the tourist destination. And it comes under a different stream of research that deals with consumer self-concept. And there is a specific theory that I've been working with over many years, which is called self-congruity theory.
Mhm.
And self-congruity theory talks about that every tourist destination has an image, a stereotypic image that says when you're thinking of, for example, when you're thinking of what would be a good place?
Well, let's say
Uh,
Amsterdam
Amsterdam.
has a
Okay,
certain image. Yes.
right. If you're thinking in terms of Amsterdam and you think of the kind of image that attracts tourists, what kind of tourist goes to Amsterdam? Now, if you think in terms of the nightlife, that Amsterdam attracts a lot of people who are young people or very sensual, attractive, and like to enjoy the nightlife. That's an image um, that ultimately interfaces or interacts with the self concept. So the community resident or the tourist himself or herself would say, how do I see myself? Do I see myself um, as the kind of person who enjoys the nightlife? Um, do I What's my ideal self-image? Uh, do I like to become the kind of person who enjoys the nightlife? What's my social self? Social self. How do I think others see me? Do they see me as a night person who likes to party at night? That kind of thing, and so forth. So if the community resident or the tourist has a self-concept that matches the image of the tourist destination, then there is motivation to visit that tourist destination and become loyal to that destination. But if there's incongruity, then there's lack of motivation.
Mm. Yeah, so that's the image of the destination, but does it also count for the image of the tourist group, the type of tourist entering?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's how you form in your mind the image of the tourist destination by you look at the kind of people that come in. These are again, I use the American slang. These are party animals.
Yeah.
So that's the image. Now, am I a party animal? Uh, and if there is, if you believe that your actual self is, there is what we call self-congruity, and that would generate motivation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But it's not that you have statements like the tourists entering my destinations are similar like me. Is that taken into account in your?
Right. So when you say similar like me, similar to me, um, in what sense? So you probably have to spell this out because
Or I can relate to the tourists, or I don't know the exact terms, but is there something in your surveys that you take into consideration that they?
so if you capture the survey that tourists that come into this city or this community are people like me, that's what we call self-identification.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and for again, if for people who identify themselves in relation to the tourists, that's definitely a good thing because that would be construed as a benefit. Um, but from a policy making perspective, it's not going to help you much unless you identify the image.
Mm.
So people like me in terms of what? people, you have to spell it out. You have to identify that image, because if you're advertising the the destination, then you need the advertisers or the public relations people will tell you, what image are we talking about,
Yeah.
because they need,
Yeah.
right?
So if you put it like how I said it, it would be more moderator in this results maybe. So if people
Yeah.
relate, then it could have that impact.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be moderator. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I see. I said it would be 45 minutes, so the time is almost done. I have one last question, because most of the studies focus on both sides, positive and negatives. How would you feel if we would only measure the positives? What would that?
Well, yeah, of course. Measuring the positive is very important, because what you're trying to do is you need to capture the positive elements and then embed those elements in a campaign. But on the other hand, public policy people or tourism development people are also interested in understanding the negative in order to mitigate those adverse conditions that produce the negatives,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So it
It
depends on
what side
whether
it-
you,
Yeah.
yeah, it depends on whether your focus is on public relations versus coming up with policies that ultimately would mitigate the negatives. So
Yeah. So that is important to take into consideration too. Yeah. Okay.
okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Oh, you're very welcome, and it's very nice meeting you.
Yeah, it was very nice to hear all your answers. I will send the MP4 if it's not available, so let me know. Are there people where that you think of that I should also talk to?
Yeah, sure. Um, Muzaffar Yusa, who is
Yeah,
essentially yeah.
I talk to him next week.
He's definitely should be on your list.
Yeah.
He's what we call a guru in tourism
You published a
development.
lot together.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
and um, the doctoral students who actually did this dissertation, and I'm referring to that article. Her name is she is Korean, but I have a feeling that you may have a hard time communicating with her, because she's has a very thick Korean accent.
Okay.
Koyoung-mi Kim, and she's in Korea right now.
Okay. But I can try to talk to her.
Yeah, I kind of lost track of her over the years, because that study was published in 2013, and it took us 2 or 3 years to get it published.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's
It's
been a
been a
while.
while. Yeah. So, well, I'll inform her if I get in contact with her. I'll tell her I also spoke to you. So
Okay.
it brings
Sure.
back a connection. So thank you. Have a very nice afternoon.
Well, you too. In the morning. Oh no, at night.
Yeah, and a
Good
nice
night.
weekend. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.